"You're worthless trash, Samuel. My daughter deserves better." The words landed like knives, sharp and deliberate. "My name is Samuel Hayes. I'm 37 years old, and for the past 12 years, I've built a private equity firm in Denver, Colorado, one that thrives in the shadows. I make investments most people don't even know exist, the kind of moves that can topple companies or make fortunes overnight. I operate through shell corporations, anonymous trusts, layers of holding firms buried so deep that even the smartest lawyers would need months to untangle the paper trail. That's how I like it, clean, invisible, untouchable. But in this moment, standing in my father-in-law's pristine kitchen while he waved his coffee mug like a conductor orchestrating my humiliation, I didn't feel untouchable. I didn't feel powerful. I felt small. Robert Kellerman had been at this for 3 years now, ever since the day Elena and I got married. Every holiday dinner, every family gathering, every time I set foot in his home, he found a way to chip at me, to remind me I wasn't good enough for his daughter. She could have married Dr. Patterson's son, Robert said with that smug, dismissive tone he reserved just for me. He turned to Elena, my wife, who sat silently at the breakfast table, slowly stirring her scrambled eggs like they might rearrange themselves into the solution for our broken marriage. "But no," Robert went on, shaking his head. "She picked you. A man who won't even tell us what he really does for a living." "Elena," I said softly, searching her face, begging her silently to defend me. "She didn't. She never did. Samuel works in finance, Dad," she finally muttered, her eyes still fixed on her plate. She didn't even look at me when she said it, as if repeating the excuse she'd given 100 times before had worn her down to apathy. "Finance," Robert scoffed, his face curling into mockery. "You know what that means? Nothing. Could be selling insurance at some strip mall office. Could be managing retirement accounts for teachers and factory workers, for all we know." He kept pacing around his gleaming granite island, his face growing redder with each lap. His words echoed off the high ceilings, bouncing around the immaculate kitchen like they belonged there. This was Robert Kellerman, the mighty founder and CEO of Nexra Labs. On paper, he was a visionary, a titan in the biotech industry. In reality, his company hadn't seen a real profit in 4 years. Investors were losing patience. His reputation was slipping. But none of that mattered here, in his house, with his daughter sitting silently between us. In this place, he was king, and I was nothing more than the unworthy man who married his daughter. And, as much as I hated to admit it, right then, he made me feel exactly that. Robert Kellerman liked to believe he was a financial genius. He wasn't. He was the privileged son of a construction magnate, living off an inheritance he hadn't earned. The kind of man who thought a trust fund was proof of intelligence. What he didn't know, what he couldn't even begin to suspect, was that I'd been watching his empire crumble for months. For the last 8, I'd tracked Nexra Labs' financials down to the decimal point. The company was bleeding money, burning through what little venture capital it had left. They weren't months away from collapse. They were weeks. Nexra didn't just need a miracle. They needed someone exactly like me. Someone who specialized in showing up anonymously, quietly, at just the right moment, when desperation made even the proudest men willing to sign away everything. Robert leaned forward, jabbing a finger against my chest. His face was flushed with self-righteous fury. "You sit there like a mute. Real men speak up. Real men defend themselves." I met his stare. Slowly, deliberately, I nodded. "You're right, Mr. Kellerman." The words dropped into the silence like stones into a still pond. For the first time in years, the kitchen went quiet. Even Elena froze, her fork hovering above her untouched eggs. She lifted her head, startled, her eyes searching mine for some hidden meaning. Robert, too, faltered, his bluster caught off guard by my calm agreement. I am right," he muttered, as if testing the words on his own tongue. "Absolutely," I said, standing from my chair. I reached for my jacket, smoothing the fabric as I slipped it on. "Elena does deserve better." That stunned him into silence. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. I walked toward the front door, feeling their eyes boring into my back. As my hand touched the brass handle, I heard the scrape of Elena's chair against the polished hardwood. Samuel, wait. Her voice cracked with something, fear, maybe, or regret. But I didn't stop. I stepped outside, closing the heavy oak door behind me. The cold November air bit into my skin, but it felt good. Cleansing. Each breath reminded me of one simple truth. Everything was about to change. 5 years earlier, I never would have imagined standing here like this. I'd met Elena at a medical technology conference in Boulder. She was brilliant, standing on stage, presenting her research on gene therapy applications with the kind of passion that made people believe. I wasn't supposed to notice her. I was there to scout opportunities in the biotech sector, weighing whether to expand my portfolio. But I didn't notice her. How could I not? The confidence in her voice, the fire in her eyes, it was intoxicating. We fell fast. Too fast, maybe. Within 18 months, we were married in a small ceremony under the aspens, the way we wanted it. Intimate, simple, untouched by our father's endless need for spectacle. Robert had complained for weeks afterward, fuming that his only daughter's wedding wasn't grand enough to parade before his country club friends. I should have known then. The cracks began showing at our first Christmas together. Robert had too much wine, as usual, and cornered me in his living room. He demanded to know what I did, what I really did. I gave him the same vague answers I gave everyone. Private investments, portfolio management, consulting for high-net-worth individuals. All of it true, just not the full truth. Because the high-net-worth individual wasn't someone I advised. It was me. Amberlin Ventures, my company, my creation, managed over $200 million in assets. Money I'd earned, money I'd grown from nothing but calculated risk and cold precision. But Robert never saw that. He saw what he wanted to see. An invisible man, a son-in-law too insignificant to even introduce at the club. And that was his greatest mistake. At Amberlin Ventures, we specialized in early-stage investments, technology, biotech, medical breakthroughs. The kinds of deals that require not just money, but silence. Discretion was everything. I had built my entire reputation on being invisible, letting others take the credit, while I quietly collected the kind of returns most investors couldn't even imagine. But Robert? He mistook my invisibility for weakness. In his world, success had to be loud, tangible, flashy. If you weren't bragging about it at the country club, it didn't count. So when I chose silence, when I refused to strut like one of his overfed peacocks in Armani suits, he decided I had nothing worth showing. It started small, comments about my mystery job, jokes about how a real man would be more transparent with his career. Elena would laugh nervously, change the subject, or apologize afterward in hushed whispers. But she never told him to stop, never once stood between us. The barbs escalated. Soon he was criticizing my clothes, sneering at my car, mocking my supposed lack of ambition. He'd compare me to the doctors and lawyers in his circle, men who wore status like a second skin, who measured their worth in cubic inches of engine and the size of their vacation homes. And the worst part wasn't Robert's voice, it was Elena's silence. The woman I'd fallen in love with, the brilliant, confident scientist who once lit up a conference hall with her passion, began to shrink in his presence. She grew quieter, apologetic. After dinners where Robert carved me up with words, she would slip into our bedroom, wrap her arms around me, and whisper apologies into my chest. It'll get better. He doesn't mean it. Please, just give him time. But time only made it worse. Then, 3 months ago, I stumbled across something that changed everything. While combing through documents for potential investments, I found Nexera Labs financials, Robert's pride, his so-called legacy. And what I saw nearly made me laugh out loud. The company was drowning, burning through cash faster than it could raise it, buried under a debt-to-revenue ratio so grotesque it scared away every serious investor they approached. They weren't weeks from disaster. They were days. That was when I realized I had a choice. Option 1. I could step in anonymously and save Robert's empire with the kind of investment only someone like me could provide. I could swoop in like a guardian angel, and he'd never know the man he'd spent years belittling was the one keeping his lights on. Option 2. I could let Nexera collapse. Watch Robert lose everything. Watch him choke on his arrogance when the board pushed him out and the world finally saw him for the fraud he was. The businessman in me calculated the upside of saving him. The son-in-law in me saw something else entirely, a chance to take control of the game he thought he was winning. So, I started the process. Carefully, quietly. My identity hidden behind layers of holding companies and trusts so dense, even the sharpest investigators would never connect the dots. And as I sat at Robert's table, enduring his endless tirades, watching Elena shrink further into herself, I smiled inside. Because Robert Kellerman had no idea his salvation or his destruction was sitting across from him, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to decide which it would be. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago, Elena's birthday dinner. We were at Robert's house, seated around his massive oak dining table that always felt more like a throne room than a place for family. Robert had invited his brother-in-law Harold, a cardiac surgeon who never missed a chance to brag about his latest toys. Tonight was no different. Harold just bought a new boat, Robert announced loudly, just as Elena leaned forward to cut her cake. 40-foot yacht. Cost him more than most people make in 5 years. The table chuckled politely. Harold beamed, puffing up like a peacock. Then he clapped me on the shoulder, grinning as if we were old friends. What about you, Samuel? Any big purchases lately? New car? Vacation property? I should have seen it coming. The question itself was harmless, but the way Robert's eyes lit up told me everything. He was waiting for this moment, baiting the hook, ready to humiliate me in front of his family. Samuel doesn't make those kinds of purchases, Robert cut in before I could even respond. His voice carried that same mock sympathy he always used when he wanted to make me small. He's more of a practical man, aren't you, Samuel? Under the table, Elena's hand found mine. She gave it a quick squeeze, a warning. Stay calm. Don't react. But Robert wasn't finished. I mean, let's be honest here, he said, gesturing around the table as though he were hosting a board meeting. My daughter is a brilliant scientist. She's published in major journals, speaks at international conferences. She could have married anyone, a doctor, a lawyer, someone with real prospects. He waved his hand vaguely in my direction, like I was an afterthought. Instead, she settled for, well, we all make mistakes. The words hit the room like a gunshot. Silence, heavy and suffocating. Harold suddenly found his slice of cake fascinating, poking at it like it held the secrets of the universe. Elena's hand went limp in mine. Slowly, I turned to look at her. Really look at her. Her face was flushed, her eyes fixed on her lap. And in that moment, I realized something devastating. She wasn't embarrassed by her father's cruelty. She was embarrassed by me, by being married to me. It was all there, written in the way she refused to meet my gaze. The same woman who once stood in front of a lecture hall with fire in her voice now couldn't muster the courage to defend her own husband. And then it hit me with the force of certainty. This wasn't going to change. Robert would never stop. And Elena, she wasn't going to stand up for me. Because deep down, where truth can't be hidden, she agreed with him. That was the moment I stopped being the victim of Robert Kellerman and started planning his downfall. Elena's eyes shimmered with tears, her voice trembling as she whispered. I didn't know what to say. He gets so angry when people confront him. I stared at her, my chest tight. So you chose his comfort over my dignity. Her head shook quickly, almost desperately. That's not fair. But it was fair, and we both knew it. Elena had made her choice a long time ago. Every time she stayed silent, every time she smoothed things over or made excuses for him, she was choosing her father over me, protecting his ego at the cost of my self-respect. I love you, she said suddenly, her voice breaking. And somehow, that made it worse. I know you do, I replied quietly. But love isn't enough when you won't fight for it. The words hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. She looked at me with eyes full of guilt, searching for something to cling to, something that might undo what had just been said. But there was nothing left to salvage. She left about an hour later. I watched her gather her things, her movements hesitant, as if she wanted me to stop her. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew she wouldn't really be coming back. Not in the way that mattered. Even if we stayed married, even if we sat through counseling sessions and rehearsed apologies, there would always be a part of her that saw me through her father's eyes. Less than, not good enough, a mistake she couldn't quite admit to. And once I realized that, the marriage was already over. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The house felt emptier than ever, but instead of weighing me down, it gave me a strange sense of clarity. By 8 a.m., I was in my office, staring at the clock as the minutes crawled forward. At exactly 10 a.m., I picked up my phone and called James. My voice was steady calm. "Is it done?" "It's done," he confirmed. The withdrawal notice had been delivered to Nexera Labs. I ended the call and leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Elena's voice came through the line, shaky and brittle, as if the world she'd known was beginning to crack. "Samuel." Elena's voice trembled on the other end of the line. "Something's happened. Dad's company just lost their major investor, $15 million. He's completely falling apart." I let out a quiet breath, masking the satisfaction that stirred inside me. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said evenly. "The lawyers won't tell him who pulled out," she continued, her words tumbling over each other in panic. "They said it was an anonymous investment group, but now they're claiming breach of confidentiality terms. Dad's talking about bankruptcy." Silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, shallow and uneven, like she was struggling to hold herself together. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer, almost pleading. "Samuel, I know you work in finance. Could you maybe ask around? See if anyone knows anything about this investment group?" The irony was almost too perfect. She was begging me to help uncover the mystery investor who could save her father, not realizing she was speaking directly to him. I swallowed down a bitter laugh and kept my tone calm, detached. "I'll see what I can do." When I ended the call, I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone in my hand. Elena's desperation had sounded so genuine, so raw. But instead of softening me, it only hardened the truth I already knew. She had chosen her father long before this moment. Now, she was coming to me, not as a wife seeking comfort, but as a daughter trying to save the man who had destroyed us. That night, as the city outside my office dimmed into shadows, I began drafting 2 text messages. One for Elena, one for Robert. I scheduled both to be sent at exactly 10 a.m. the following morning. At the same time, James Morrison would also send his own message, the final confirmation that the mask was coming off. By tomorrow afternoon, there would be no more secrets. Elena, Robert, everyone would know exactly who they had been dealing with. Before shutting down for the night, I opened the Nexera Labs files one last time. Page after page confirmed what I had already suspected about Robert Kellerman's so-called business genius. The numbers told a story he'd tried to bury. The company had been bleeding money for 18 months, ever since the disastrous product launch he had forced through against his research team's warnings. His arrogance had cost Nexera Labs 2 major pharmaceutical partnerships and nearly $3 million in wasted development costs. And yet, he still strutted around like a visionary, a man convinced of his own brilliance, even as his empire rotted from the inside. Tomorrow, that illusion would shatter. What I uncovered in the files confirmed every suspicion I had ever harbored about Robert Kellerman's so-called business genius. Nexera Labs hadn't just stumbled. It had been quietly bleeding out for the past 18 months, its finances unraveling one poor decision at a time. The collapse had started with a failed product launch, a project Robert had bulldozed into existence despite repeated warnings from his research team. The scientists had been clear. The formula wasn't stable, the testing incomplete, the risks too high. But Robert, in his infinite arrogance, believed his business instincts outweighed years of data and expertise. He silenced every objection, forced the launch forward, and in doing so triggered a disaster. The product flopped spectacularly, costing Nexera nearly $3 million in wasted development costs and shattering partnerships with 2 major pharmaceutical companies. The blow should have humbled him, should have made him reconsider the reckless bravado he disguised as vision. Instead, Robert doubled down. He deflected blame, fired 3 senior scientists to create scapegoats, and immediately began courting new investors to paper over the gaping cracks in his empire. But what burned me most was what I found buried in the records: Elena's name. She had been one of the scientists who fought against the launch. She had written a detailed, meticulous memo outlining the flaws and the inevitable failure that would follow. Her report had been thoughtful, precise, and devastatingly accurate, and Robert had tossed it aside. He had dismissed her concerns as nothing more than the cautious whining of academics, too timid to recognize opportunity when it knocked. The irony was unbearable. Elena had stood for truth and reason, yet, when it came to choosing sides, she still chose him. When the launch collapsed, exactly as Elena had warned, it wasn't Robert who paid the price. It was her. He made her professional life so unbearable that she eventually resigned, walking away from the career she had built at Nexra Labs. She never told me the full story. What she gave me were fragments, a vague mention of disagreements with her father about priorities, framed as if it had been nothing more than a clash of perspectives. But the files told the truth. It hadn't been a polite difference of opinion. It had been Robert's arrogance steamrolling over sound science. And Elena, brilliant, meticulous Elena, was one of the voices he crushed along the way. I needed confirmation, so I reached out to someone who had been there during the fallout. Dr. Patricia Webb, another scientist who had left Nexra around the same time as Elena. We'd crossed paths at several industry conferences, and I remembered her as someone who spoke plainly, someone who didn't sugarcoat the messy reality of biotech politics. I dialed her number, my pulse steady but my jaw tight. After a few rings, she picked up. "Hello, Patricia. This is Samuel Hayes, Elena's husband. I hope you don't mind me calling." There was a pause, then a warm note of recognition in her voice. "Samuel? Of course not. How's Elena doing?" "She's fine," I said quickly, though my mind flickered back to her tear-stained face the night before. "I'm actually calling about something else. I've been looking into Nexra Labs for a potential investment, and I wanted to get your perspective on their research capabilities." Silence stretched on the line. Not the silence of confusion, but of calculation, of someone weighing what they could say against what they should say. When she finally spoke, her tone had shifted, lower, cautious. "Samuel, can I speak freely?" I felt the muscles in my shoulders tighten. The way she said it told me everything before the words even came. "Yes, please. Whatever you tell me stays." She had lived in a comfortable illusion, keeping both relationships intact. Her loyalty to me as a husband, and her silence as her father chipped away at my dignity. As long as she stayed quiet, she never had to confront the truth, that she had watched it all happen and chosen not to intervene. But now silence was no longer an option. She was going to have to choose. And based on everything I had uncovered about Robert Kellerman, I already had a chilling sense of which side she would take. The next morning, I arrived at my office before sunrise, the city still wrapped in gray silence. My desk was spotless except for one stack of papers, the withdrawal documents. I read them line by line one final time, my eyes catching every word even though I already knew them by heart. Everything was perfect. By 10 a.m., James Morrison would walk into Nexra Labs and hand Robert Kellerman his death sentence, an official termination notice that would collapse his empire in a single blow. At the exact same moment, 2 scheduled text messages would go out. One to Robert, one to Elena. At 9:45, I picked up my phone and dialed Elena's number. My heart rate didn't change. My voice didn't shake. The calmness was almost frightening. "Samuel," her voice came through nervous, uncertain. "Is everything okay?" "There's something I need to tell you," I said evenly. "But I want you to sit down first." Her breath caught. "You're scaring me." I didn't soften. "Elena, I'm the anonymous investor who pulled out of Nexra Labs." The silence that followed was so absolute I could hear the hum of electricity in my office walls. 20 seconds passed. 30. Then, finally, a whisper. "What?" "My company, Amberlin Ventures," I continued, "was prepared to invest $15 million into your father's firm. I withdrew the offer yesterday morning." "That's impossible," she said quickly, her voice breaking under the weight of denial. You work in portfolio management. You don't have $15 million. Elena, I said, each word sharp, deliberate. I own Amberlin Ventures. We manage over $200 million in assets. I've been the anonymous investor your father has been chasing for the past 8 months. Her breathing grew ragged, fast, uneven, like someone who'd just had the ground yanked out from under them. She stammered, this is some kind of joke. Check your phone, I said coldly. In exactly 12 minutes, you'll receive a message. So will your father. And then you'll see this is no joke. I ended the call without waiting for her reply, letting the silence swallow whatever she might have said. In 12 minutes, everything would change. The message will be from me, I said calmly, confirming everything I just told you. Samuel, Elena's voice cracked. This doesn't make sense. If you have that kind of money, why didn't you ever tell me? Because you didn't need to know, I replied. My tone was steady, almost surgical, and because I wanted to see how your family would treat someone they believed was beneath them. Her breath hitched. So this, what, is some kind of test? No, I said, my voice dropping lower, colder. It was going to be an investment. Right up until your father looked me in the eye, called me worthless trash in front of your entire family, and you said nothing. The silence broke with the sound of muffled sobbing. Elena was crying now. I should have defended you. I know that, I know. But Samuel, this is my father's life. His company. You can't destroy everything he's built just because your feelings got hurt. This isn't about feelings, I said sharply, cutting through her plea. This is about respect. About consequences. Something your father has never faced in his life. Please, her voice was trembling. Please don't do this. We can fix it. I'll talk to him. I'll make him apologize. I leaned back in my chair, my hand tightening around the phone. It's too late for apologies. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. A notification flashed across the screen, delivery confirmed. At the same time, I heard the faint vibration of Elena's phone through the call. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice breaking into panic. Samuel, please. I'm begging you. Don't destroy my father. I'm not destroying him, I said evenly. I'm letting him face the consequences of his own choices. This is cruel. What's cruel, I snapped, is watching your husband be torn down for 3 years, humiliated, dismissed, degraded, and never saying a single word to stop it. For a moment, all I could hear was a ragged breathing. Then the line went dead. 5 minutes later, my phone lit up again. This time, it was Robert Kellerman. I answered, and before I could even speak, his voice roared through the receiver. You son of a... You think this is funny? You think you can destroy my company because I hurt your feelings? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Mr. Kellerman, I said, steady as stone, I think you've misunderstood the situation. I've misunderstood nothing. He spat, fury rattling in every syllable. Elena told me everything. You're the investor. You're the one who pulled out, Robert said, his voice tight with rage. That's correct. 23 people work for me. Samuel, he shouted. Do you understand what that means? 23 families depend on this company for food, for rent, for survival. And you're willing to destroy all of them because I insulted you. His words came out in broken bursts, anger fighting with desperation. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone loosely. No, Mr. Kellerman, I'm not destroying them. I'm simply refusing to bankroll your arrogance. If your company is strong, it will survive without me. If it collapses, it's because of you, not me. You son of a... He stopped, sucking in a breath. The silence stretched. Then, quieter, almost pleading, we had a deal. We had a conversation. A preliminary agreement. Nothing binding. No signatures. No contracts. You assumed my support was guaranteed, and you assumed wrong. That's not a betrayal, Robert. It's just business. There was a pause. When he spoke again, his voice had lost all of its fire. It was smaller, thinner. For the first time, he sounded like a man who'd run out of cards to play. What do you want? Nothing. There has to be something. His tone cracked, half anger, half begging. Money? Control of the board? An apology? Tell me what you want. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the silence hang heavy before answering. I want you to know what it feels like to need someone you consider worthless." And then I hung up. I turned my phone off, set it on the desk, and let out a long breath. My hands were steady. My heart was steady. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. It was over. 3 days later, Elena filed for divorce. She didn't face me. She didn't even call. Instead, she came to the house while I was at work, packed her things in neat boxes, and left a letter on the kitchen counter. 2 pages, written in her careful script, each word pressed so firmly the pen had nearly torn the paper. But when I read it, I realized it all boiled down to one simple message. She couldn't stay married to a man who had deliberately hurt her family. What she didn't write, what she couldn't bring herself to admit, was that she had already cut off her father. I only found out later through Patricia Webb, who had kept her ear close to the biotech community. Elena, Patricia told me, had confronted Robert directly. She hadn't just asked him why he treated me like dirt, she demanded to know. For hours, they argued. Robert tried to justify everything. How he pushed his staff for greatness. How his cruelty was really discipline. How his arrogance was confidence. But Elena didn't buy it anymore. Patricia said Elena finally exploded, told her father exactly what she thought of him. His reckless business decisions. His sabotage of his own researchers. His years of belittling her, tearing down her husband, and destroying everything she tried to build. The confrontation ended with Elena standing in her father's office, staring him in the eye, and telling him that he had ruined not just her marriage but her career as well, and that she never wanted to see him again. Robert didn't take it quietly. He called her. Once, then again, 17 times in total. Each time, her phone lit up with his name. Each time, she let it ring. She never answered. By the end of the week, Nexera Labs was unraveling. Word of my withdrawal spread fast through the biotech community. At first it was whispers, investors asking each other why Amberlin Ventures had pulled out. Then it became open discussion. The truth was simple. Nexera Labs had been fragile for years. My money had been the only thing keeping their lenders calm. Without it, the cracks widened into canyons. 2 other investors, firms far larger than mine, cut ties almost immediately. Their reasoning was simple. If a major player had walked away after 8 months of due diligence, something had to be deeply wrong. Debt ratios skyrocketed. Rumors of mismanagement spread like wildfire. Staff began to panic. A handful of top researchers quietly submitted their resignations, unwilling to tie their reputations to a sinking ship. And Robert Kellerman, the man who had once stood at industry conferences boasting of his genius, now found himself cornered. The very people who once flattered him stopped taking his calls. Emails went unanswered. Meetings were canceled. Invitations revoked. The empire he believed unshakable was collapsing in real time. And this time, no one was coming to rescue him. I never spoke to him again. The last I heard, Robert sat alone in his office late into the night, staring at the models of molecules on his desk as if they could explain where everything had gone wrong. He had money in the bank, yes, but no investors, no daughter, no allies. For the first time in his life, Robert Kellerman finally had to live with the consequences of his own arrogance. And for the first time in mine, I no longer had to. Robert was forced to make the kind of decisions he once swore would never touch him. 8 employees let go in a single week. His secondary research facility, once the centerpiece of his grand expansion, shuttered and silent. The Denver Business Journal ran a feature on Nexera's unraveling. The headline wasn't cruel, but cut deep. Once promising biotech stumbles after investor withdrawal. Robert refused to comment, but the article didn't need his voice. Former employees spoke instead, scientists and administrators who had lived under his leadership. Their words painted a picture of chaos, a company crippled by arrogance, poor planning, and a leader more concerned with winning arguments than building stability. By the end of the month, Robert's life looked very different.